Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of OnReviewCast. I'm your host here, Hash, and today we're taking a look at Season 2, Episode 3 of Interview with a Vampire on review. And just like every other episode, guys, we're going to take a look at this episode first by going through our episode breakdown, courtesy of Fandom. No Pain is the third of the second season of Interview with a Vampire and the 10th episode of the series overall. It aired on May 26, 2024 on AMC and AMC Plus, and was written by Heather Bellison and directed by Levin Hackett. Yeah, let's get into it. Let's do it. So this episode, first and foremost, I want to start off by saying that this is an okay episode, and I say that because I think we got a lot of more information, I think, from the Anne Rice's universe. They're starting to reveal, I think, in my opinion, with this episode, some of the good highlights was that they're starting to reveal a lot more like mystery. They're trying to remove a lot of the shadow that's been clouding like things about like these vampires and how they have rules and etc. and how I think a little bit of insight as to how vampires are made as well. So this is actually good. This is a very informative episode if you're actually really paying attention. So let's go through some of the things that I made note of and I highlighted on review of this episode. So that first scene with the MI6 agent, taking a look at that, like that was pretty interesting actually. And I think if you guys watched all the way to the end of the episode and you saw the episode breakdown essentially of how they made this episode essentially, it's apparently this whole this agent making contact with Malloy is supposed to be a whole other thing, a whole other world above and or beneath or whatever you want to call it, the vampire world. Because if you think about it, really, like we've been really focused on the past, right? We've been really focused on the past. Basically every episode that we take a look like it is the recollection of Louis' past or recollection of Armand's past, so basically what they have endured and what they've been going through as vampires. And that's been cool, but I guess it's been so entertaining and so focused on that we kind of forget that there is a present that Daniel Malloy kind of like lives in today where he's aware of these vampires and we are not really told too much about the status of what's happening in today's world of the vampire like society. And that's when they start talking about or mentioning a little bit of things like the Great Conversion. Apparently, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys, like that was something that I kind of missed in the first season of him talking about this whole thing, this idea of the Great Conversion. I guess there's this idea to convert all the humans on the planet to vampires or something like that, which is in my opinion, a real fucky weird idea, or maybe it's a conspiracy theory thinking that all the vampires on the planet want to convert people into humans. But either way, this story or this idea, and they only show it for this brief scene. They kind of talk about it for a few seconds. He's approached by this guy who seems to be like secretively talking to him. He doesn't look like he wants to talk to him, and they start talking about the Great Conversion, and it's something about how like I said before, all the vampires converting basically humans, all the vampires converting humans into vampires as well. And he kind of gives Daniel a little bit of insight as to like basically, or he puts the idea in his mind that his laptop's being hacked and he's being manipulated to basically some degree now. And similar to how we were talking about in the previous episode of OnReviewCast about how he is in a way being manipulated by these two vampires because basically there are two of them now, and he's being targeted by two of them, and realistically, which is why I guess if you think about it, and again I'm only speculating because this is someone who hasn't necessarily read the books, and this is someone who's only necessarily seen the movie. I assume that the reason for this book now, because that was I was kind of saying in the other episode, it was kind of like, okay, well, to what end? To what end do they need to do this interview? Because Armand didn't want Louis to do the interview in the first place, and they're still going ahead and continuing it after he revealed himself. And I just didn't really see the need for this interview in the first place. But that whole idea of the MI6 thing and the whole idea of like, okay, well, the whole idea of like, of thinking that like, the whole idea of thinking that like there is a great conversion plan where they plan to convert all of these people into vampires. That's a pretty, I guess I could see a reason why you would then want this book to be created or made, because telling that story or sympathizing with these vampires to some degree is a part of the, human nature. Look at us, we're human and we're watching this, right? But that's what I mean. I could see how it could be used as a ploy to kind of manipulate people into a certain degree of, being more sympathetic towards the vampires, and maybe seeing that, oh, vampire life isn't so bad, so convert to vampirism. But in that same regard, I kind of feel like that's kind of counterintuitive for the vampires, realistically. And I think the Vampire Diaries kind of did cover this along with other series back in the day. If you convert all the vampires, because this is a movie, I think I remember it was. If you convert all the vampires, all the humans to vampires, like you have nothing to drink, right? And the scarcity of blood would be astronomical, and vampires would essentially starve. And it's a funny symbiotic, well, not symbiotic, a parasitic relationship between vampires and humans. Vampires need humans to live, and they may be more powerful, etc., but they need them to essentially, survive and keep on living and keep on going, essentially. So yeah, something else in this episode too. I thought that was a very interesting thing, and they kind of like layered it, like I said, like in the first little bit, and it was just like a kind of like a flash in the pan kind of thing. But anyway, something else on this episode. I think it's something I just think it's something to also pay attention for, maybe in the future going on, because I think that's going to be a major thing that's going to creep up slowly within the whole universe of Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire. In this episode, we get Armand narrating again. This is kind of like, I felt like it was almost kind of a two-parter, but not really a two-parter, like half and half. We got a little bit of Louis narrating, but they actually did it right this time. Fuck. They let Louis narrate second, and they let Armand narrate first. So Armand, because this is the recollection of how he met Lestat, basically. And still not essentially too keen on the whole Louis taking the reins. Armand taking the reins and narrating this entire thing. Still not too keen on that. But I mean, honestly, it was okay. And honestly, we kind of started coming realistically. Is our Interview with the Vampire doesn't necessarily mean it'll always be Louis. It'll always be Louis in making these interviews and doing these things. So, fair enough. So he recollects and he tells this story about how he had this coven back in the day and how they used to basically live underground. They had these basic rules that was essentially archaic and almost like godlike to essentially a certain degree. And the first thing we kind of see is how he's like sitting in this chair, kind of sort of like, a king, but not really looking like a king, more looking like a very dirty and very, but you can tell that basically that's their leader. So he sits in the big chair, but they're very basically living in squalor. And I think that's something that they actually even mentioned in the show. They're not really living the high, rich lifestyle of you would expect from the romanticized vampirism lifestyle that we would know for today. And we see him do this like flicker thing with his hand, like he raises his hand, and then like we see like a little bit of like Hollywood magic happens where the flames get like they kind of roar, they kind of come in bolstered in a kind of way. And when I saw that, I was kind of like, wait a minute, what the fuck was that? Go back. What was that? I was like, did it roar to his gesture? I was like, oh, the flames did roar to his gesture. So, interesting. Maybe that was just a coincidental thing. Maybe they were just trying to make a point as to like, he's a kind of a, he's just that in depth with his emotion. He's just like, it's just to build the scene, you know, just to build that intensity of of going after Lestat, who apparently has been breaking some laws, being a vampire within the city and breaking the rules of being independent or whatever it is. Maybe they were just doing that to make a point, but that's not necessarily the truth, which we see further on within the story. So Armand goes to the theater where Lestat's basically being a great big entertaining bitch. Basically, he's entertaining the crowds, and he's loving it, and he's loving the lavish lifestyle of a vampire performing on stage, but while not interacting with his coven, who basically has this rule of no other vampires should be within, you know, the other vampires' territory without making contact with the coven. So there's like rules. They're off about like they kind of like tell like rules to this, so they kind of like hint towards like rules to this. And the other vampires within the coven have been watching, and within Armand's coven, have been watching Armand live this lavish lifestyle, like I said before, independent of these rules and not necessarily paying attention to any of them. And the members of the coven have been growing jealous and envious of basically Lestat's freedom. So Armand feels like he needs to put a stop to it, and this is the first time when they actually meet. And then some wild shit starts to happen, yeah? And the wild shit I refer to is that it is a little inkling what we saw with the fire from before. And when they first make contact, this motherfucker, first of all, does some Gene from X-Men type shit and moves and pushes things around with his mind and freezes time. The freezing time thing that we've seen that before in season 1 with Interview with a Vampire, with Louis was playing cards with the guys in that parlor, and Lestat was there, and he froze time and he's talking to him in his mind. Not things that we haven't seen before. Something that's wild and fucking crazy is him moving shit with his mind. It's not that, that's just that's some witch shit, right? I mean, again, you gotta remember, I'm coming off of the Vampire Diaries, I'm coming off of the days of Angel and Buffy and etc. Vampires and moving shit with their minds, I guess like a super enabled vampire, super older vampire, maybe. So I guess it was a little odd, but it wasn't too much of a stretch. It's getting kind of witchy, and who knows, maybe the witches do make themselves apparent in this series as well. But that ability to move things with his mind, and showing more vampire tricks, that's it's cool. It was the way that I didn't necessarily have a problem with the way they did it, and it was different, but. It was just, I guess, I was just like, oh, he's magic, you know? I was just like, oh, okay, so this motherfucker is just like magic and he can move things with his mind. But not only that, we find out later on within the story too, Armand also has fire type kind of like magic. And I'm like, okay, all right. Moving shit with your mind was one thing. Now we're getting into fire. I was like, what is this blasphemous shit? You know what I mean? Like, what is this? This is, I mean, I feel like there are rules for me for vampirism. I guess that you're telling the story, but when it comes to vampires, you can have your own rules and sure, or whatever it is. But it comes to a point where we have like, or is he a vampire or is he a witch? Is he a heretic? Heretics in like the Vampire Diaries could be like both vampire and witch, which is okay. That's an explanation. We have a whole different class for those people. That's cool. But it's like, now it's like, what is he easily like some kind of mutant or whatever? And they only kind of sort of explain it to like a certain extent as to like how he's able to do this or whatever. It's I don't know. It's like a vampire trick, I guess. Like maybe all other vampires can do it. But the moving stuff with their mind thing, I think that's a little too far. We're moving into witch territory and moving things with their minds and being able to conjure fire. Fire, really? Yeah. I don't know. It's a little weird. It's a little weird in my opinion. I feel like it's a bit much. But anyway, yeah. Speaking of blasphemous things, though, honestly, we found out in this episode as well that like Magnus was real. Magnus was the vampire that Amon mentions in the first meeting with Lestat. But Lestat actually brought him up in season 1. In season 1, he told Louis and Claudia about Magnus and how he was turned and how he was just thrown. He just gave him a bunch of cash after he got turned, and Magnus threw himself on the fire and basically and essentially killed himself. And at the time, watching that in season 1, we definitely felt, at least I felt, let me know you guys agree in the comments, I definitely felt that this is like, is he lying? Like, he could be lying. He could still be lying. Do you know what I mean? But apparently he wasn't lying, because if Armand is confirming it, kind of saying that like, oh, we can sense the blood within him and he knew Magnus, and Magnus was a part of his like little brigade kind of thing. It probably means that he was an actual character within Lestat's life, and he was real, and all those things that happened to Lestat essentially happened. Yeah. So, did anybody else think though that it was weird, right, that we had Armand in the 18th, 17th century like clothing, this Indian-looking character, Indian-looking man, and I get like for modernization's sake, inclusivity, guys. Yes, I'm all for that inclusivity and et cetera. But realistically, you probably thought to yourself, like, this probably didn't go down, you know, the way it essentially they're portraying it here. This Indian guy is just surrounded by these like fucking posh white people that look so fucking European. Like realistically, we know some hardcore racism was there. And they even, it was weird because again, they kind of even essentially, well, that was America and this is Paris. Okay, fair enough. So hold on. So that was America and that was Paris, because they did address some of the racial things that was happening in the vampiric relationship between Louis and Lestat. And we didn't really necessarily see that in contrast when Lestat essentially got with Armand. And then, like I said before, we prefaced that, I guess, that it's Paris. Maybe they're a little bit more liberal because we do see a different mix of different races within the crowd of Paris, rather than that of America, where we saw Lestat had to essentially escort Louis into the theater and these different places because he has essentially dark skin. But I mean, this crowd seems to be a little bit more diverse and they seem to be a little bit more hip with it. So I guess that could compensate for that. But it just was a little bit weird to see just this Indian guy, you know, dressed as these 18th century people in such a way where it's like, oh, like it's not a big deal. You know, he probably did get some flack, but I want to believe, like I said, like Paris is more liberal with the blacks and people of different color and different descent. So I guess there's room for there's a little bit of leeway for that as well. But yeah, I it's just, this episode was just, this is wild. I can't believe I just gotta go back to one thing. It's like, that mofo was magic. I was like, oh, we dipping into magic now. Like, really? Anyway. So, again, going back to the whole blasphemy thing. Lestat essentially comes in and ruins the plans of, or breaks up the coven. Something that happens in this episode too, because Armand has his coven essentially, and he has his rules and etc. or whatever it is, and they get broken up. And they go off living their, unadulterated, independent lifestyles of being a vampire. When he comes in and Lestat basically tarnishes their view or their perspective of what a vampire should be and how a vampire should essentially be. And I thought that was actually cool. Because they talk about how the vampires that were under Armand's keep talk about how God wants us to be a certain way and we follow a certain way, or X, Y, and Z. And Lestat comes in as, the blasphemous kind of like character that kind of shows them the way. It's like, no, like they're the gods, they're the one that makes the decision, etc. And I thought that was actually kind of cool, because the way that they did this is a kind of if you think about it, it's kind of a commentary on how we perceive in the real world our connection in a spiritual way to God. And while some of the things, I guess, we, even today in today's modern society, we agree with, not essentially everything we agree with, within that. Because, I mean, like I said, he was kind of like almost like modernizing them to an extent. I feel like it's kind of like, yes, you have your spiritual beliefs. Like today, we have our spiritual beliefs. Everybody has their spiritual beliefs. We respect one another in their spiritual beliefs. But essentially, we don't let them tie us down to being, just what we are. We go outside the bounds of essentially what we are. And I thought that was kind of cool. When he basically liberated them, and he basically took his coven away from Armand, and then he reveals to Armand that they're with me now. They're on my side. They're living the way how I live, essentially now. And it was also revealed that Lestat was actually the one that came up with the idea in this episode that all of these, that the whole hiding in plain sight thing, acting and performing on stages and killing people on stage in real life was actually acceptable, or they did it in a way where it was acceptable. They basically can get away with it and they can be freely and live in this way. So this whole lifestyle that they have now in the 1940s, when Claudia and Louis get there, by the time Claudia and Louis get there, this whole lifestyle, this whole formula of killing people on stage and etc., and living a theater lifestyle, that's all Lestat's doing. And they're still living in the reminiscences of and the ideas of us Lestat, essentially. Yeah. So something also to note in this episode. Something else. Claudia during this episode, so we see that Claudia is going through the initiation of being indoctrinated into this coven of vampires. I thought it was kind of weird that the initiation process, I mean, I guess this is the first time, first of all, this is what I'm talking about too, we got to see a little bit of information in terms of like how covens work within the Analysis universe. And for some reason, when she would go to talk to the other members, and as a part of trying to get into the coven, she couldn't look them in the eye. Very weird custom. Is almost kind of like, it reminded me of one of those like hazing college kind of like fraternities or frats or whatever. Is like, you got to go through this initiation process to be one of us, which I always thought was fucking stupid, honestly. Like, really, I have to go through all this bullshit to live in this house with you people because it's college? Like, honestly, fuck off. I was never in a frat, guys. I was never that kind of guy. I was never, no, fuck that. I would never. Like, why would you humiliate yourself and go through so much bullshit just because like you want to live with these people or whatever, or you want to, just so you could be one of us. Fucking creepy. Anyway. But yeah, like it's through this initiation, we see her going through this in this episode. And one of the things she's not allowed to do is look people in the eye. And I thought that was kind of fucked. I was like really, this is the same bullshit I'm talking about. You can't look people in the eye, or you can't, you're not supposed to directly talk to them, or essentially. But it's something I want to note. With that being said, it seems like that they were forming some kind of bond. She was forming some kind of bond with Santiago, who I must say, it's just the irony of it all is that the movie Santiago, like I said before in the previous episode, looks very different to the Santiago that we know today. The movie Santiago, it looks like he kind of fucking appeared when they went to the 18th century, 17th century kind of mode where Lestat and Armand first meet. And we saw the guy with the scythe. That's how Santiago basically essentially looks in the movie, guys. Just a heads up. And it looks pretty fucking, he looks pretty fucking on point. So this blonde-haired Santiago, theatrical looking motherfucker, they did that on purpose. That's why I'm bringing this up. So clearly they did that on purpose. But yeah, It's just weird. But anyway, nah. So in this episode, we're still sticking with Claudia though. We got to see Claudia actually, because she didn't really do it much. She didn't really even talk about it in detail too much in season 1, but something they revealed was her interaction with Bruce and her inkling and talking with Bruce. And Bruce, if you guys don't remember, Bruce is the vampire that essentially violates Claudia in every sense of the word, and keeps her trapped under the floorboards apparently, and uses her and abuses her essentially. And it is a brave thing that Claudia does and comes out to Louis and essentially starts talking to him about her horrible experience with this vampire, whose name, by the way, that they are using, or facade they're using to describe their maker, because that's one of the questions that the Coven actually asks them. Yeah, it's. I just thought that it was that was actually a brave thing that she did. Not only a brave thing that she did, but I thought it was. I guess I want to say it was sort of. It was sort of, yeah, no, it was pretty on character. I was gonna say it was kind of off character for her to do that, because she's always perceived as like a more tougher kind of vampire. But she opened up and she was vulnerable because she wanted this to work so badly. She wanted this to be a part of this coven, essentially, so badly. But yeah, that was. I just thought that was kind of. It was kind of mature of her, I would say, yeah, for her to actually address, basically, and want to talk to Louis about what was basically happening. And it was a bad timing because Louis probably should have told her that, hey, you know, they know now, and that's when right when he was trying to tell her that they know that, like, Lestat, they were fucking around with Lestat, and Lestat is the one that basically turned him, and etc. and all this other stuff. I mean, well, Armand knows that Lestat was the one that turned him and all this stuff, but I mean, at least she came out and she had like a deeper understanding, deeper conversation with Louis. Something also really, really cool within this, like I said before, I think that was really big, was that we got to see the initiation of Claudia being brought into this coven. So she finally gets to be a part of this coven and be a part of this community, this place's belonging. After going through this whole initiation, this abusive, even Roman said, this abusive and humiliation after a while. And I will say this, that like this is the first time we ever seen an initiation by the Coven of bringing someone else and analyzes the universe by the Coven. It's the first time we ever seen a vampire brought in. And so if we review, she had to do basically grunt work, and they held her up on a chair, and then they read these rules, which is the real interesting part, that the Coven members essentially got to know. While Louis and Armand went for a walk. And prior to this, Santiago is basically pressuring Armand to kill Louis because he is not following the rules. He's not being willing to convert and or join their coven, and it's seen as disrespectful in the eyes of Santiago, apparently because of what they did to his maker. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's get to these rules. So these rules that essentially, which I found was fucking interesting, was no kids are supposed to be given the dark gifts in terms of vampires, and they must have a leader within the coven of the vampires. And no vampires should write the history of the vampires. And lastly, no mortal can know of the existence and be allowed to live amongst the vampire. No mortal can know the existence of vampires and be allowed to live, essentially. I didn't know what I thought to myself. Louis has broken all of these fucking rules. Louis has broken most of not all of these fucking rules, and that's why I'm thinking, like, and I know that like they use it as a writing technique, as a writing motif. Realistically, when we get the expositions when in writing of different different rules within a story, realistically, one, if not all of those rules are going to be fucking broken, because that's how conflict and tension are essentially made within the story, in any story that you're basically telling. And it's I mean, even though we know it's coming, or even though I knew it was coming, when I started to listen to the rules and when I really started to review them in my head, I think about Louis again. I was just like, this motherfucker has broken all of these goddamn rules. It's too late. It's too late. Like, it's no wonder they want to kill him already, or what have you. You know, think about it, right? I mean, no kids. First of all, Claudia's a fucking vampire. That was a whole thing that he even mentions to him towards the end of this. Claudia's a vampire. He didn't turn her, but the assumption, I guess, would be that he turned her, and someone else basically turned her, and she's something that would need to be essentially be dealt with. That's a rule broken. A leader is a must. Louis is usually either a solo vampire, or he was in love with Lestat, and that's how the first place he got turned into a vampire. So it's not, he never really found himself like looking to the world Lestat as a quote unquote leader. And then no vampire history writers must write the history of the vampire. I mean, Louis has been doing that with the interview with Malloy. He's been writing about the history of essentially Claudia and the other vampires that he's come in contact with, and himself. So he's a vampire. So I mean, he's broken that rule too. And no mortal can know of the existence and be allowed to live. Daniel Malloy is a fucking mortal. He's broken this rule time and time again. This is the second interview, because if you remember from the movie, Daniel Malloy is at a different age, and now he's at a different age now in the series. This is the second time he's broken that rule. So all of these rules have business essentially being broken. I'm just pointing this stuff out. So if you guys didn't notice, that's just something on review that's pretty fucked, in my opinion, and that gives them reason, that pulls them reason, that gives them every other reason to essentially kill them. Whether it's they also there was a rule of, sorry, I missed the rule, guys, of no vampire must take another vampire's life. They killed Lestat. So, and that was one of the big things. I'm sorry about that too. That I missed that. That was one of the big things within the actual movie itself. It was one of the main reasons why they basically wanted to kill Louis, because he broke that rule. But yeah. So something also within this is that Armand and Louis, while they go off for their walk, Armand mentions a coven or multiple covens, not of vampires, not only subjected to Paris, but one subjected to London as well. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So sounds like there are covens all over the world, essentially, and the world is essentially a way bigger place than they essentially realized. Because they've been looking for covens and looking for vampires for a while. They found one other besides this group, and besides getting to Europe. But it sounds like it's a whole society. And we know that it's actually confirmed because of the first scene we heard the numbers of the vampires that are essentially growing because of these certain people that were tracking them, and they talked about this, great conversion or what have you. But yeah, and essentially we had towards the end this moment of tension of wondering why if Armand was going to actually kill Louis, because again, like I said before, Santiago was rushing him into it, and instead we find that the two end up sleeping together, and Armand doesn't actually end up killing Louis because he's falling in love with him. But yeah, guys, that's gonna do it for the end of the episode. Now we're gonna jump into something real quick, and we missed the last episode we did miss it, and I'm sorry we did miss it, but we're gonna jump into Ash's favorite scenes. Yeah, Ash's worst scenes. I guess this episode didn't really have any. I'll be honest, it didn't really have any worse scenes in this. This is pretty solid. So we're gonna skip that, but I think the third best scene in this, coming in at number 3, the initial scene with meeting with the MI6 kind of like agent kind of guy, like that was kind of cool. this definitely, I could see how this could spin off into a whole different story and within present day, because we've been, like I said, we've been in the past for so long. That's been a whole story in itself with these different characters and etc. But when we spin into the present day, what's happening in the real time with the status of the vampires, I'm very curious about that. Let me know, the guys in the comments, how you feel about that as well. Let me know how you feel about what do you think is actually happening present day with the vampires. And it sounds like a war is imminent within the present day, and this book is supposed to be like, or this attempted book is supposed to sway humans to, you know, the vampiric side. Coming in at number 2, I gotta admit, seeing Armand do magic and all that other crazy shit again, while not, I mean, kind of different, but it was just kind of like, oh, again, he's magic. Like, I was like, he's very old vampire. He's different, I guess. He has, you know, a whole bag of tricks that we necessarily don't know about, and that's actually kind of cool. So, to get a little bit of insight to see that a little bit of a different kind of vampiric ability, besides flying and, you know, the speed and strength. So yeah, that was kind of cool. I like that. And then coming in at number 1, the vamp rules. Santiago started like mouthing off those rules to Claudia. That was pretty cool. I liked how we got a little bit more insight and a little more information as to basically how covens work and why, you know, and what rules are essentially set, and well, at least within that coven, because each and every coven might be different. They might have a different rules, but like we got a little bit more exposition as to like how vampires kind of sort of work in this world as well. So I essentially thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, and we're gonna get the OnReview score, and just before we go as well. And OnReview is going to give Interview with the Vampire Season 2, Episode 3. This one gets a 3. This one gets a 3 too. It wasn't that good to Brad. It was just kind of okay. So it's going to give it a 3 out of 5. 3 out of 5. Yeah. Yeah, anyway, guys, that's going to do it for the episode. Not a bad episode. Definitely enjoyable. We got a little bit more information and stuff, basically this universe and rice and etc. But yeah, that's gonna do it for the episode. Like I said, thank you guys so much for listening and watching on YouTube. I appreciate it, guys. Don't forget to hit us up on all of our socials: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And lastly, guys, I just want to say this episode was brought to you by Anomaly Beats. Beats by Ash. Don't forget to look me up on Anomaly Beats by Ash. It's some anime styles, you know, lo-fi kind of stuff. If you're looking in the mood to study and you need some background music, or you're really a fan of anime music in general, anime OSTs, remixed or revamped in a certain kind of way, go ahead and check that out on YouTube and all the streaming platforms as well. Lastly, guys, like I always say, don't forget, be safe, be kind, be you. Take care.